Good afternoon. It's 12 noon on Wednesday, August the 28th, 2024. For the record, this meeting of the city's Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission is called to order. Will the clerk please conduct a roll call and determine if we have a quorum and if any members are on the telephone?
Chair Stodel,
Present.
Vice Chair Laramie, Commissioner Levine, Commissioner Beck, Commissioner Hotchkiss,
Here on the phone.
Commissioner Serfas,
Here.
Commissioner Cosgrove, Commissioner Palacios, Commissioner Moody,
Here.
Commissioner Perdue, Commissioner Roberts, Commissioner Seabrandt,
Here.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Present.
Thank you. We do have one member on the phone. That's Commissioner Hotchkiss.
And Commissioner Roberts is excused.
Yes, he is. And so is Commissioner Beck.
Agenda item number 2 for the clerk was the meeting of the city's Historic Preservation Commission posted in compliance with the Nevada State Open Meeting Law.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. The third item on the agenda is the public comment period. Comments during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Would anyone like to speak? Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to agenda item number 4. This is the time provided for the chair to make any announcement relative to the Historic Preservation Commission. This portion of the agenda is not an action item. It's simply set aside to simply what the agenda title states, the chair's announcement. First, let me pass out 1, 2, 3, 4. Would you pass those down? Pass that. And first, a copy of an email from Commissioner Daniel Roberts that was sent to the chair and the city staff is now being made available to each commissioner as well as the city clerk. To become part of the official records of this meeting. Second, in discussion with the city attorney's office in the past 24 hours, including the message from Commissioner Daniel Roberts, who requested that the matter of agenda item 1122-0444-HP1, the report by the city attorney's office regarding the Huntridge Theater settlement, I'm going to move that up to the agenda item number 6 and ask for an abeyance until our September 25th meeting. So I'm going to move that up. As I say, the city attorney's office has provided the commission with a copy of the 12-page settlement agreement between the state of Nevada, the city of Las Vegas, the former owners and the current owners of the Huntridge. In addition, the city attorney has also provided the commission with all the exhibits connected with that agreement. It's a backup material in your board packet. The chair has asked the city attorney to provide the Historic Preservation Commission with a written report on its responsibilities, the HPC's responsibilities specifically under the agreement. They are relatively clear, but they are in different places in the 12-page settlement agreement. Again, that was signed by the mayor as well as the state of Nevada, the AG's office. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 5. This is a possible action item regarding the draft of the minutes of the regular meeting of July 24th, 2024. Each commissioner has been provided a copy of the draft. Does any commissioner have a correction, clarification, or amendment to the draft? Hearing none, I look for a motion to approve the final draft of the minutes.
Commissioner Laramie, I've
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion. Further discussion by the commission? General public? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with those in attendance and the chair voting in favor. Next, I'd like to move on to agenda item 11. This is 24-0444 HPC1, report by the city attorney's office regarding the Huntridge Theater settlement agreement and the mutual release and Historic Preservation Commission's responsibilities. We had a request from Commissioner Roberts, since he won't be in attendance, and has been part of the request to ask for this report, has asked that it be obeyed in discussions with the city attorney's office. They could also use the extra time between now and September. Is there anything that Dr. Seabrandt or the city you'd like to add to that?
Not at this time, thank you.
And I would look for a request, a motion for abeyance until September the 28th? 20.
September 25th.
That would be a better date, September 25th, as that's the day we're going to meet.
So Commissioner Cosgrove, I move that we hold this in abeyance till September 25th.
Further discussion of the commission? General public? Hearing seen none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with those in attendance and the chair voting in favor. Thank you for that. Let's move then on to agenda item number 6, which is 24-0438 HPC1, discussion for possible action regarding approval of the first draft of the updated National Register of Historic Places nomination for the old Las Vegas Mormon Fort located at 500 West Avenue. During the October 25th, 2023 HPC meeting, the Commission approved funding in the amount of $28,920 to hire COTS Historic Preservation Consultants to amend and update the national registration of that site. The new nomination should include an expanded portion of historic content as well as updated description and all the physical alterations that have taken place in the more than 50 years since the original nomination was filed in 1971-72. The draft was made available to the Commission more than 2 weeks ago under a new process created by the Historic Preservation Officer to give the Historic Commission more time to review these documents and provide comments was what I spelled. The consultant will incorporate any necessary revisions and present the second draft on October the 23rd, 2024. Dr. Seabrandt?
Seabrant, for the record, I think you covered everything very well, Chairman, so I'll let our consultant go ahead and give her report.
All right, one one additional point. Yesterday sent a copy of the my notes that Dr. Seabrandt has, as well as a consultant, on some opportunities within the documentation. For the record, welcome. Please identify yourself.
Oh, thank you. Zoanne Campana with Couts Environmental Consultants. Thank you all so much for having me today. I just have a brief presentation kind of giving a little bit of background as to why we did this nomination update and also to give you an idea of what has been done with the first draft. So first, I just want to note the 1972 nomination. So this is what got the site on the National Register of Historic Places. And like most of those early 60s and 70s nominations, it's very brief. It doesn't give a lot of detail. The whole purpose was to just get it on the National Register to recognize its significance. And that's really what the city of Las Vegas did when they nominated it. They were looking for grant funding, and so they nominated it for the National Register to try and preserve that remaining adobe building. And so part of why, well, another reason why it's so brief, it predates all of the archaeological investigations of the site, so we didn't know quite as much about it. It's only 12 pages long, and that includes maps, There are no photographs. The historic context is very limited. There's no eligibility or criteria provided for the site, and that's something we live and die by now with the National Register, right? A, B, C, and D, which again is common for these early nominations. We often don't see eligibility criteria or a period of significance. In this case, the nomination just notes 1855 as a significant date. And the boundary is conjectural. And again, that's based on the fact that this predates those archaeological investigations. And then 6 years later, in 1978, they applied for an increase on the boundaries of the property as it was listed in the National Register. And this was really to update the boundaries to reflect the known extent of the fort. And again, this is still before archaeological investigations. These boundaries were researched by the Preservation Association of Clark County, so looking at old maps and drawings. And again, this is very brief. I mean, really, the whole purpose of this document is just extending those boundaries. And there are a few photographs of the surrounding land, but no real idea of what's there or any additional historical significance. So fast forward to 2024 and this nomination update that we're doing. And it's really a substantive update. So it requires us to completely fill out the nomination form from scratch. And that includes updating the narrative description and the documentation of the site, the statement of significance, and also identifying a period of significance and specifying those eligibility criteria. So part of that documentation update includes having a full site description. So what all is there, the setting, the landscape, the reconstructions of the fort walls and the bastion, any alterations that have happened, which the adobe remnant has experienced some changes over the years, and documenting both the historic and modern resources on the site, the interpretation and the visitors center, bathrooms. A lot has changed since this became a state park. And also having updated photo documentation so we know what it looks like now in 2024, the full extent, and also mapping so we understand what resources are there and their relationships to one another. And of course, also updating that significance. And that has to include the full story of the site. A lot has taken place here. And this is such a special, unique location in Las Vegas because it's an example of a place that has been continuously used by humans from the prehistoric era all the way up to the modern era. So it's really just hitting those significance themes, the prehistoric and indigenous significance, of course, the mission and the ranch eras, the railroad era, the Bureau of Reclamation era, and the preservation efforts that took place on the site. While maybe not significant in and of themselves, they started taking place in the 30s and really ramped up in the 70s, 80s and 90s, and they're really the only reason why we still have this site, so it's important to include in that story. I believe you all have received, yes, you've all received a copy of the nomination update, and I have received comments from a couple commissioners. Chairman Stoldahl and I emailed back and forth a little bit yesterday on just suggestions to make this as good as it can be, because again, it's so important to the history of Las Vegas. And I also received another comment from another commissioner, which I really appreciate because it is something I was not aware of in regard to terminology. So I just wanted to briefly talk about that. Oh, Commissioner Moody, thank you, I appreciate it. Commissioner Moody shared with me the official style guide that was issued by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2019. And it's quoted up here, but essentially, just for brevity's sake, the style guide discourages the use of the term Mormon unless you are talking about a proper name, like the Book of Mormon, the Mormon Trail, or in our case, the Las Vegas Mormon Fort. But it's discouraged to reference the name of the church or the name of the members of the church. It also discourages use of the abbreviation LDS. This was something that really made me curious as to how it translates to historical writing, especially public and scholarly writing. So I did send out a couple emails, one to Fred Woods, who is the BYU professor who wrote A Gamble in the Desert. And he referred me to Matt Godfrey, who is a historian with the church in an official capacity. And he was very kind and took a lot of time with me. And his ultimate recommendation was follow the style guide of the church. I did also reach out to a couple Western history professors in Nevada and Utah, and through them, I was connected with Paul Reeve. He is the Simmons Chair of Mormon Studies and the History Department Chair at the University of Utah. He was also the past president of the Mormon History Association back when the church issued the style guide. And his organization, like a lot, basically had to vote on whether they would continue using their name. And ultimately, they voted in favor of keeping their name, as did all of the Mormon studies programs that are in the United States. And their reasoning was that there are multiple religious traditions that trace their roots to Joseph Smith or otherwise accept the Book of Mormon as scripture. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the largest of those traditions, but they felt like in their scholarly study, if they adopted the style guide of the largest organization, it would do so to the exclusion of all the other traditions. So that was just an interesting other opinion. He said in his work, he always refers to the church in its full name initially, but he continues to use the term Mormon when he's talking about the members of the church historically, in historical context, and Latter-day Saints when he's talking about them in a contemporary context. So anyway, I just wanted to offer that up because I had not thought about terminology. As it pertains to this nomination, of course, we want to respect and represent the diverse perspectives and people that are involved in the history of the site. And already in the nomination, when we're talking about Indigenous people, we're using accepted terms like Native American, Native, Indigenous, specifically Southern Paiute upon first introduction, followed by Paiute, and also Nuuvi, which is the Southern Paiute name for themselves. And I do realize now that we need a footnote for the use of those terms, I think, in the document. And so for the second draft, when we are referring to the Latter-day Saints, of course, we can retain the proper names, Las Vegas Mormon Fort, Mormon Trail, Mormon Road, the initial reference to the church with its full name, and then other references are, I think it's easy enough to change to what the church and the church members prefer, and also use terms like the missionaries, Latter-day Saints, throughout the nomination, although I'm open to the direction of the commission when it comes to terminology.
Well, I'm still off the record. I'd like Commissioner Moody jump in on this, but two things that strike me, and one is, first, the respect of the church and the members of the church. Secondly is respect of the time period. this is a document talking about a transition. And if I read the style guide, so to speak, that initial title should be used in this report. The challenge is when the term Mormon became so predominant. I was a reporter at the time that the church initially put out the style guide. And it wasn't controversial at that point. It was just there was a transition. This is how we would prefer it, and most people respected that within the business. So I would look back, and then the second thing I would look back at would be, what is the terminology that the Deseret newspaper used at that time period? There were any number of stories about what was going on. And if they referred to use the word missionaries, and I think that that's also a legitimate use of the terms within this report. So you start off with an overlapping respect for the church and its members. Secondly, what were the terms used at that particular time by the church, and then by church publications, so to speak, the general public publications. So those are my initial thoughts on that. Commissioner Mooney?
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner Moody, through the chair. I'm super impressed with your deep dive after my comment about the style guide, so thank you. I absolutely agree, when you're referring to the places, the time period, it would be absolutely appropriate to use the term Mormon. And I can't speak on behalf of the church, but exactly what you've offered and suggested, I think makes absolute sense to, spread out missionaries, Latter-day Saints, the church, and use the name Mormon sparingly. I do have one comment on the slide that's up, the third bullet point. It should be a capital "the" with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
The one question that came out, who named it the Mormon Fort? The missionaries didn't call it the Mormon Fort. I'm wondering when that term, I went through my notes and I couldn't find exactly when that term started to be used to identify the particular site. Was it the Daughters of Utah? Are they the ones that said, you are now the Mormon Fort? If we find that, I mean, that would help delineate different things as to why we use the term Mormons. But
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I'm thinking like of Delphine Squires, when she wrote the newspaper about saving the site, I believe that was 1912. I wonder what she calls it. I can't remember offhand.
it would be interesting to see when the first time that phrase was used by the Utah newspapers as well. I mean,
Yeah.
Utah, Salt Lake City was alive and well with a half a dozen very active newspapers during the 60s, 70s, 1860s, 70s, I mean, so there's plenty of, and a lot of them, I mean, one of the benefits is that Utah newspapers, so many of them have been digitized and are word searchable. It's, I don't know why I didn't think about just to type it and see when it pops up.
Yeah, it was not on my radar, but I'm so glad it is now.
Please, Commissioner.
Commissioner Perdue, I was interested in approximately how many Indians were in the area at the time, and were they living at the springs 2 or 3 miles to the west, or were they encamped just in various spots around the water? I thought it would be interesting, or along the creek, I thought it would be interesting to know to what extent they interplayed with the people in the fort.
Yes. And that's something that Chairman Stoldal and I kind of emailed about yesterday, where it was a small number by then. I don't want to give you a number off the top of my head, because I don't think it'll be right. And the springs were used seasonally, so it wasn't a permanent campsite. But that's something that I plan to go into more detail on for the next draft. I do have a little more presentation. It's quick, I think just 2 more slides. I just wanted to talk about identifying the significance criteria. So criterion A for its association with historically important trends or events. And really, again, because it represents this whole gamut of Las Vegas history. I think John Homan said it was the history of Las Vegas in microcosm, from pre-contact to the modern era. So just hitting all those significance themes that we talked about before. And then also criterion D, which is the archaeology criteria. And it's still, even though there have been investigations and it has been built on top of, the existing archaeology was filled. So it still exists below the surface, and there are still sites and artifacts that have not been discovered. So there's just enormous archaeological potential for the whole site. And what archaeologists have found so far date to all of the periods of occupation for the site. So it really is very unique and very special in that way. And so that was it.
It was like
Yeah.
a service station.
That was the fort when they built a little shelter over the top of it to protect it.
Don't you think that looks like a signal station?
But I'm here for any comments, revisions, suggestions. If you wanted to email those to Diane, or I have my notepad, I'm happy to incorporate whatever direction you have into the next draft.
Hollis Gillespie for the record. I just wanted to add a brief comment about terminology again that we were talking about. In the last year, we were approached by community members of the Church of Latter-day Saints because there were portions of the museum exhibits, the permanent exhibits, that refer to Mormons, and they gave us the style guide, and we talked to a number of people, not the Simmons professor, but we ended up adopting kind of what he was suggesting, that when we're using terminology of the time and the historic context, we tend to use Mormon, but we're going to continue to look at that to see that that's the best way to display things for a modern public.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
Commissioner Modi again through the chair. So I would be really interested to know how the call came for those first settlers, and when I say first settlers, first Latter-day Saints settlers to come in 1855. I anticipate it came in one of 2 ways. It either came by a letter from Brigham Young, or probably more likely in a general conference meeting where people are completely surprised and caught off guard saying you are called to go settle in Las Vegas. But I think whichever one it is, we should be able to find that and get some details about when that came and exactly what the direction is. For example, were they told specifically where they were to go and how long they were expected to be there, and how many of them, accepted that call and actually relocated? But those would all be really good details in my mind for this application.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that's in Fred Wood's book. And I'm fairly certain it was a general conference where people were just told, hey, this is where you're going. This is what you're doing.
The second challenge that you're going to face is how much detail. I mean, books could be written about gas and even better books about Helen Stewart and more. I mean, the whole odd period when the U.S. Army was there for a moment with sick people, and then there was the pretending during the Civil War that it was a real fort. I mean, there's so much. Then the fourth thing that comes to mind is all the actual factual gaps that we don't know. The deed transfers, if there were deeds, and as the Commissioner Mooney said, how did they come here and say, oh, that's a good spot, let's go down by the creek, or were they specifically ordered to go to that particular thing? And did the church work out some arrangement with the federal government to quote homestead it or whatever? There's going to be a point where you're going to have to just sort of kind of clean things up, get the facts straight, add whatever it is. Otherwise, you know, the nominations are going to be 6 volumes, which is okay with me, by the way, but I don't think that that's where we're going to go. Further comments, questions? Please.
Commissioner Laramie, I have a question, and this is more for my own education, really, than, you know, a discrepancy, but I am having trouble understanding how the structures on the site are contributing and considered, you know, to retain integrity when a lot of them are restorations or, you know, historic materials are covered by the stucco. So could you kind of elaborate on, you know, I guess, the way in which you're reaching, you know, significance? And I don't want to say significance because I don't dispute the fact that the site is significant, but how these structures ultimately end up contributing to the overall nomination.
Yeah, the integrity is very tough. And that was something that when I first started writing, especially like the integrity paragraph, I was like, oh my gosh. Because it has changed a lot. And the good thing with the reconstructions is there's a criterion consideration for reconstructions. And so if you can justify that it's based on historical research and on like factual evidence as far as the dimensions and the form, then it will meet that criterion consideration. And there is a paragraph on that in the nomination. But the Adobe structure is definitely harder because it has been extremely altered. Really, it retains the most integrity from the Bureau of Reclamation period, because that's when all the windows and doors were added. Its integrity of materials is not so good because just the Adobe plaster and the fact that it's been recovered, you know, reclad year after year with modern materials. But there's enough there as far as the footprint and the fenestration that can still link it to that Bureau of Reclamation period.
Okay.
But yeah, most of the other resources are modern and don't contribute.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I do remember now the paragraph regarding the kind of fenestration. So thank you. I think I just didn't connect the dots there. I know that Commissioner Stodel made some comments regarding, you know, increasing some information about kind of how the historic materials of the quote fort have been covered, and I would kind of second that and just recommend maybe some additional conversation about how to maybe restore some of that integrity, because we know it's there, but it's just not, you know, being the best representation of itself right now.
Correct, yeah. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, three last quick points. The first one is as far as the generic term indigenous population, I would really suggest you reach out to Commissioner Beck. She has a great deal of knowledge about that, and the challenge there is not what the population today is trying to reform the history, it's what was taking place at that time. Secondly, Commissioner Roberts, he said that a nice accounting of the history of the fort, several different owners, operations, and multiple renovations and restorations have been conducted. leaving very little of the original structure intact. Could more detailed maps and renderings be provided to explain the specific eras of ownership, such as the swimming pool that no longer exists, creating maps that identify different eras in this property under different ownership uses compared to what exists today would be helpful. The last thing, we would need a motion to accept this draft with the appropriate changes. Look for a motion.
Commissioner Moody, I'm happy to make that motion. Move to approve the draft with the recommended changes.
Further discussion by the commission? General public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with those in attendance and the chair voting in favor, and our thanks to all the work you put in, and look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to work on this project, so
Thank you.
thank you.
Agenda item 7, subject is 24-044.
Excuse me.
HPC 1, discussion for possible action regarding the approval of funding in the amount of $250 to renew the commission's membership with the National Trust for Historic Preservation Preservation Leadership Forum. Dr. Sebrandt?
Thank you, Seabrant, for the record. So this is the annual renewal of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and this is the one that does give us discounts on their annual meetings, as well as some access to training courses and publication. Chairman Stodel did mention that he hasn't received the publications, so these should be, this organization has everybody's email, so they should be sending those, but we will, Teresa and I will check to find out why they haven't been received.
There's a quarterly report that comes with this, so if you, Dr. Sebrandt, when you receive yours, would you let us know, and we'll see whether or not we received anything or a link to get the digital copy. Thank you. Further questions from the commission? Otherwise, look for a motion to approve.
Commissioner Cosgrove, I motion to approve agenda item number 7.
Further discussion of the commission? General public? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting with those present. Agenda item number 8, which is 24-0441, HPC 1, discussion for possible action regarding approval in the amount of $150 to renew the commission's membership with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. The background regarding the organization and the membership is in the board, in the board packet. Anything you'd like to add?
Seabrant, for the record, no, that's, you've covered everything. Again, it's just we need to use HPC funding in order to renew the membership.
And again, this also has a quarterly report, so Commission, keep your eyes out. Both of these are very solid documents. They're not 200 pages long, but they're very topical and are very helpful. So look for a motion to approve.
Commissioner Laramie, I make a motion to approve agenda item number 8.
Further discussion of the commission? General public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with the chair voting with those present. Let's move on to agenda item 9, which is 24-0442 HPC1, a report on this year's meeting of the National Alliance of the Preservation Commissions. At the April 22nd meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, the commission approved funding up to $17,000 for commission members and the staff to attend the National Alliance. the forum. 2 staff members and 2 commissioners were able to attend, and our thanks to all 4 for taking the time to do that. The final total cost of the 4 attendees out of the $17,000 was less than $10,000. It came to $9,689.09. In addition, the State Historic Preservation Office will provide a reimbursement for a portion of the cost as part of the certified local government agreement that exists between the City of Las Vegas and the State of Nevada. For the commissioners who are unable to attend the conference, we look forward to the report from staff and Dr. Seabrand.
Thank you, Seabrand, for the record. So I'm just going to give just a really brief overview, and I'm hoping that Vice Chair Laramie and Commissioner Gillespie will be able to give their input as well. So as you know, that it was in West Palm Beach, Florida. Teresa and I were actually stuck because of the Hurricane Debbie that came through there, but the commissioners did make it out in time. But it was a very useful, very good conference. Although the 2 locations are environmentally very different, one being tropical and one being desert, the City of Las Vegas does have very a similar type of a history as West Palm Beach, as far as the late 1800s, early 1900s, starting as a railroad town. And that's how the population really started developing and increasing. Also, they do not have buildings that are hundreds of years old, just like Las Vegas doesn't have buildings that are hundreds of years old. So they are facing the same challenges that we face as far as how to save and preserve a 100-year-old building, whilst development in the modern era is taking place, as a lot of people are moving into Florida, and there's businesses going in there, just as they are in Las Vegas, and how to mitigate preserving the history and but also allowing the development in the modern world. And they do have something that's called transferred development rights that I was going to read up a little bit more on, but just going to go through a couple of the slides here. So in addition to the sessions that we attended, there were also several tours that were really important for us to get out and actually look at these places. They had tours of some of the parks and how the natural settings are being preserved with a lot of the old the trees, as you see on the left here. There's, again, the theater was slated for demolition. I'm not quite sure what they're doing with that one, but it is an older building that is considered historic. We did have a night at the Flagler Museum, which is an absolutely stunning museum. And this is where we're able to meet and talk to a lot of the different commissioners from different states, different cities, different counties. Did meet a couple people from Winnemucca. But those are the only other Nevadans that I was able to connect with. Also, they showed us a lot of their historic districts. Their historic districts are pedestrian friendly. There has been a lot of adaptive reuse and infill, but they have done a great job of preserving their historic districts. Also, there are some side trips, the one on the left to Fort Lauderdale, which is also was part of the population boom with the railroad. There was the picture at the top with the blue house that is the, I'm now losing the, cottages at Lake Worth, thank you, which are quite similar to some of the smaller mid-century houses we have in the city as well. And so we were actually able to go inside these houses and see them both on the external and internal. And the last picture is from, where's that from? I'm not sure where that one is from. Oh, Clementa Street, okay. And so these are the types of things that we would have the city employees that were either planners or historic preservation officers that would be giving us these tours and explain what they had done with the preservation. And so with that, I will turn it over to Vice Chair Laramie to give her intake on it, input on it.
Sure. Thank you. So, Commissioner Laramie, again, and I kind of really focused my I guess, time there on sessions that had to do with underrepresented communities and histories, as well as community engagement. I thought there were a lot of good takeaways. You'll see some of that come up in my recommendations for future agenda items, but some particular kind of historic contexts that caught my eye that I think would be really are missing here for us in our region are an overall context for Indigenous peoples, and as we were talking earlier, really kind of laying out what those different time periods and how Indigenous people moved throughout this area, how that grew into Spanish settlement, and then later pioneer settlement. The particular project-based, surveys that we have aren't the place for that kind of in-depth history, so having just a historic context that looks at that would be the place to get all that documented. There was also one in Minneapolis based on music history. I think that could be a really interesting project here in Las Vegas. We obviously have quite an entertainment and music-focused economy here. So I think that would lend itself very well to be an interesting report. There are a lot of other things I learned, which I won't specifically go into, but I will get my notes organized and share with Diane some of the other particular programs around community outreach that some of the other cities are doing to kind of better connect with their community organizations, to help them in their historic preservation efforts and kind of get that feedback and really kind of decision-making into their historic surveys and reports to really understand how the community is wanting to see these different resources preserved, which I think is a gap that we haven't quite been able to close here yet, although I know that we're making progress on that and working on that. I also did go on a bus tour of a redevelopment district in the historic Northwest area, which is a historically African-American area. I have to say I've been on a lot of redevelopment tours, and this was by far and away the most inspiring and successful, I think, redevelopment area I have seen. It's been a lot of years in the making, and it's very evident that they're kind of reaching that tipping point. So, had I been on this tour maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe that conversation wouldn't have been the same. But as Diane mentioned, they're using a lot of different incentives, and historic preservation is one of them in that community. They have a historic preservation rehabilitation program. You do not need to be a registered building to be able to use that that incentive. You just have to meet the qualifications. I found it very interesting. They brought us by some projects where they are, shoring up the outside exterior walls to ensure that they're not damaged, and spending, they are very open about that. Their projects don't necessarily need to pencil if it's providing a community value, and sometimes the community value is just the building itself and what that building means to people. And if shoring up those walls are necessary to make the structural improvements and the other kind of improvements that need to be made, their redevelopment department will do that. It brought to mind the bank building on 4th Street, some of our old motels that, have kind of been condemned for structural reasons. I think it was very evident from being on that tour that if there's a will, there's a way, and I would love to have a more in-depth, maybe kind of educational conversation with how we could start looking at some of these potential possibilities through our own redevelopment efforts here in the city. So I will end there. Again, we'll just share that the NAPC Forum is my absolute favorite preservation conference. I think I always get a lot of really good information from this conference specific to our roles as commissioners, and so I would encourage folks to attend in the next conference in 2 years.
Well, first of all, thank you for that report, and look forward to discussion on the funding of non-registered buildings and just expanding on that topic. I think we should be doing that. There's a couple of others that we could bring in some experts and do that. But again, thank you for attending the conference and taking the time to do that. It's very important. Another member of the commission was also part of the investigation.
Thank you. Hollis Gillespie for the record. I want to say that the slide, the image that you saw of the fountain in the church that will be demolished, that will be an Italy. So there's a number of both facade and interior structures that are proposed to be changed, and the current mayor of West Palm is in high support of it. And I think one of the things that was interesting to me in not only in the on-site sessions, but also in the field observations, was there was a similar age of historic preservation activities to Las Vegas, but I found more strongly instances, not just in West Palm, if there was a strong mayor system, and so there was a lot of almost reversals of things that had been done in these conservation areas depending on who was elected. The other thing, and I probably have a little more familiarity because I lived in South Florida for 12 years, and I'd seen kind of that dynamism of, it's like Las Vegas, it is a destination, so there's a lot of in-migration from all over and a fantasy of, what is it like? What's Las Vegas like? And then people come, and if it meets their expectations, they want it to stay that way, and if it doesn't, they try to tame it somehow. And there's a lot of climate and environmental impacts that relate to that. And as a little bit of trivia, the Florida Keys is in a very vulnerable marine ecosystem, and it has always had, at least in the recent several hundred years, a fairly modest population of people there. And that changed dramatically, including the water quality and life of corals, in 1986, when can't remember the first name of the first key, they opened the first air-conditioned Wendy's. And then pretty soon, more air conditioning, so it became, you saw what the temperature was like. It can be uncomfortable, at certain times of the year. So I enjoyed seeing that. I really enjoyed meeting a number of the people that were from different areas of South Florida that are in historic preservation, whether they were working in nonprofit advocacy organizations or in city governments, because it seemed like there was a lot of tight partnerships and similar vision. That doesn't mean that there isn't still a great deal of pressure of people wanting, South Florida is God's waiting room. It's also sort of the point of entry for recent immigrants from many countries, but largely South America. And so the identity is, and the self-identity and the expectations are really varied, and sometimes they're they go well together, and other times they're really in contradiction. But I agree with Michelle that this is the second on-site I was attended in, and I also did the online. I've learned quite a bit about what commissioners do, the role of commissioners, and also the various tentacles of like organizations that are working to preserve our built environment and our community cultures. And thank you for that opportunity.
Question by the commissioners, any thoughts, comments? Any wrap-up, Dr. Seabrandt? I think we kind of covered a very solid report.
Everybody covered everything that needed to be covered, I think. But yeah, we hope that more commissioners can go. This is a every other year conference, so, and it's going to be Minneapolis is the next one.
The other option is also something that Dr. Laramie.
No.
mentioned, and we've done in the past, we've also brought the classes here on particular topics and so forth, and that's another potential to get all of the commissioners involved. But again, our thanks to everybody that attended and brought back the information and the ideas. Let's move on then to agenda item number 10, which is HP 240443, HPC1, discussion, possible action regarding the creation of a subcommittee to review and evaluate nominations for the annual Excellence in History Preservation Program. Since 2003, the HPC has promoted the importance of historic preservation through its annual Excellence in Historic Preservation Awards program in May. May was selected for two reasons. First, it's the month that we celebrate. The city celebrates the creation of the town of Las Vegas on May 15, 1905. And second, the National Trust for Historic Preservation established May as the Preservation Month back in 1973. Initially, the commission created 4 categories: bricks and mortar, education, advocacy, and career achievement award. Later, the Bricks and Mortar Award became the Dorothy Wright Bricks and Mortar Award for her leadership in historic preservation in Las Vegas, from Las Vegas High School to leading the charge in preserving La Concha to her chair of this commission. Originally, the nominations came only from members of the commission. Recently, that was informally expanded to include the general public and city staff. And then a couple of years ago, Dr. Seabrand came up with the idea and is now part of the award ceremony. We have a luncheon on the day of the awards when they're formally presented. Neither the awards category nor the process of nomination or voting has been formalized or is part of the Historic Commission's bylaws. The awards process needs to be formalized. In addition to HPC, it needs to decide if the existing categories should change or expanded, who should make the nominations, just the commission or general public. And also keep in mind the mayor, Mayor Goodman, has also a historic preservation award that comes out of the mayor's office, including for adaptive reuse. Whether the next mayor will continue with that, who knows, possibly maybe it's embedded now in the system. Dr. Seabrand, anything you'd like to add at this point?
Seabrand for the record. So you've covered everything very well again. The commission did ask for some type of a way to streamline the process. And so our thought was, and this is an action item, so you can approve or deny it as you wish, to have a subcommittee of commissioners that would rate each nomination. And we would do it as we, when we do RFPs, and this is for throughout the city. If somebody has an RFP, like Cultural Affairs has an RFP out, they get the grant proposals in, like they'll ask me to be on the board, or, and then you have a checklist of what you are rating the proposal against, and so we could come up with something similar that we're rating the nominations against, and then each one is given a score. And this would entail the commission, whoever if we do this, the commissioners would have to agree to volunteer their time outside of this meeting to do this. Now, again, it's not a requirement because you are volunteers, but it's not something that could be done here in the meeting. So it would entail, it's not, they wouldn't meet together. Everybody would rate each nomination on their own at home, send us back their scoring sheets, and then staff would put those scores together, and then we'd say this is the highest number, and then that would come to the commission as a whole. If I think Chairman Stodel maybe has a different idea of which way you want to go, so this is open for discussion of what we want to do with this.
Right, and I think Dr. Seabrand has one of the key elements is how if we get nominations for a particular category, if we get multiple nominations. Right now, it's a bit awkward in the sense that that's a very public process. Nothing wrong with that, but that's the way it is. So generally, anybody who gets nominated gets approved. The second thing we need to sort of clear off, and the city attorney will help in this category, is there is some looseness about subcommittees. I don't have a looseness with subcommittees. If there is a committee of a public commission, any subcommittee that, or committee, whether you call it subcommittee or whatever, that's a public entity created by a public entity, and therefore it needs to follow the open meeting law. It needs to have an agenda. And I'm basing that on two factors. One very personal one, the last thing as a reporter for years that I ever want to be accused of is violating the open meeting law, but that's a very personal one. But secondly, it's also based on 20 years, going on 30 years of history working within the state and the city and the county system, to where committees that are created by commissions are public committees, and therefore they have open meeting. There's been some looseness in the school districts, subcommittees, they call them working groups. We have a couple of working groups within the Centennial Commission, a city body, but the working group doesn't meet as a working group per se. It provides information and then it's presented to the commission. So I don't know whether or not you can firmly come down and say one way or the other at this point, or whether you're able to do that. I don't know whether there is a clear rule on it.
Sure. Chairman Settle, this is Paul Mata for the record. There is actually an NRS statute that is on point here. It's NRS 241.015. The creation of a subcommittee by HPC in and of itself wouldn't make it a public entity subject to open meeting laws. However, if the subcommittee is composed of a majority of commission members, or if they're tasked with doing, making recommendations to HPC so that they can take activity on it, then that would make the subcommittee subject to open meeting law. And it sounds like one of those two bases would subject the subcommittee to the open meeting law.
Again, it's the age kicking in. So could you just give me the last two, the exception part of that?
Sure. A subcommittee would be subject to the open meeting law if it is either composed of a majority of commission members or HPC staff, or if the subcommittee is tasked with making recommendations to HPC so that they can take action. So it sounds like the subcommittee would probably fall in one of those two categories. And that's NRS 241.015, Section 5D.
The second way, and Dr. Seagrant and I only had disagreed
Excuse me.
about that, it is that the categories that we need to finalize and include what Dr. Seabrant was talking about, and that's once we get the nominations, how do we vote on that? But there are the other elements that need to be decided upon by this commission, and that's the existing categories. Do we keep them or do we expand them? And who should make the nominations? And then to Dr. Seabrant's point, once we get the nominations, how do we vote? In public, we send them in to Dr. Seabrant, and she adds them all up. So what we can do is, these are the four categories. An email can be sent out to each commission member, and then each commission member would send back what their ideas were for those categories, and then just Dr. Seabrant and the staff would just combine them into a report that we would be presented to us, and then we would say, we like this and that and that and that, and then we take a vote and we create that document. So it's either a subcommittee or a committee as a whole, but we wouldn't be talking amongst each other. We would just be sending a note back on those four categories. So that's kind of where we stand. Does anybody have any thoughts one way or the other, which way? Because we do need to clean it up. It's pretty just sort of out there, and we sort of make stuff up.
This is Commissioner Laramie. I think I would suggest maybe a combination of the two, where we have some pre-discussion via email of just some, back and forth, sending our recommendations so that there's some organization there. And then, either having a working group meeting or a special Preservation Commission meeting. I would recommend, that we could just have one meeting where then we could have discussion and have a decision together because I think that in email, you lose some of the insights of what other folks are talking about, and, sometimes that changes your own idea, or, you're like, that's perfectly fine. I think that the two ideas achieve the same end result, and I think that can be hard to kind of come to a consensus or a decision point when you're really just working in your own bubble, So that would be my recommendation, and potentially, if we have some light agendas coming up, maybe we could even do it at a regular meeting. I would expect it to be a longer item, though, and so that would, I would defer to Diane with
Yeah,
what would work
Seabrant, for the
best.
record, we have to keep in mind that there's a pretty heavy schedule for this room, so it's not just available at any time or any day. So I would rather suggest that, it be an item on a regular agenda that we could just discuss more thoroughly.
Any other thoughts? It sounds like that what we, just sort of getting nodding heads and agreement is that we would need to have an email go out from your office with these 4 categories, the 4 questions, which are the whether or not the existing categories should stay the same or we should add. And it would be helpful if potentially you could also send us what the qualifications are for the mayor's office, so we're not replicating or duplicating what their guidelines are. But it would also help if, in fact, that the mayor has guidelines for each of those categories. So it's determining whether the existing list of categories for the awards is enough or we need to add. Secondly, the process of nominations. That's a relatively simple one. Should that just be left up to the commissioners or to the general public or to additional? And we need to also remember that Dr. Seabrand is a member of this commission. She is a commissioner as well, non-voting per se, but under the rules, and she is, in fact, is a member. So she would be able to nominate, or we just have the general public. Somebody would like to make a nomination and they fill out the form, okay. We just need to decide that, whether it's us or the process. And I think we should go ahead and just, even though I don't think there's any question about that, do we want to continue with the luncheon? So those are the 4 categories. What are the categories? The process for who can nominate, how we vote on the nominations. And I don't know if we need to really vote on the luncheon, but we could just sort of, I'd give that a thumbs up, but let's put that on there. And then we all respond back as quickly as we can to Dr. Seabrand, and then Dr. Seabrand simply puts together a report. The question is, how do we can turn that into an action item, I think, simply saying that we need to vote on these particular topics, as opposed to
Well, it's going to, Seabrand, for the record, it's going to depend on what everybody sends. I mean, if it's like 50 different ideas, we can't vote on that.
No.
So it would have to be a discussion about what the commissioners have suggested.
Right, okay. So that would be, and it potentially could be 2 meetings, and the next one after the discussion, we could put it on as an action item with the particular things that we agreed on. So if that's okay, we'll simply do that. I don't know if we need a vote on that?
So yes, this is an action item, so if you don't want to go this route, then the commission would need to deny this. Because this is specifically for the subcommittee. Because what, Chairman Stoddle, you're asking for is different than what is this item. So we're going in a bit of a different direction. So if you deny this, then we will just get the emails out and then compile just a report for the next meeting.
Can I amend this?
Because the proposed action wasn't on the initial agenda, and this is a different action item now.
Yeah.
It changes our ability to vote on something that wasn't previously
Same
disclosed.
topic, same results.
But the action item as listed was approval of a subcommittee, which it sounds like that's not what the commission has decided to do.
So then what we're asking is an administrative piece of business that we're asking Dr. Seabrant to move forward with. I'm trying to figure how.
Is that a future agenda item that you want her to bring back?
Or are we, do we have to put this, delay this to our next meeting as a future agenda item?
So, and I'll look to Paul for confirmation on this. So if the commission doesn't want to do the subcommittee, then deny this. Then we will put out the email. Everybody gives us their input individually via email on the categories you suggested as far as adding, keeping, altering the categories, the process in which the nominations will be voted on, and to keep or not keep the luncheon. Everybody does need to get back to us in a very timely manner. I'll give you, I don't know, 2 weeks maybe. And then we'll put together the results of that, and then it will be a report at our September 25th meeting, and then we can go from there. Is that acceptable?
That's fine.
Sounds like a plan, unless we need to, great. So what we do need to do is clean up the agenda, and we do have this as an action item, and we're not going to go with the subcommittee. We're going to go with more or less the committee as a whole of all of us providing.
So this is
our
Commissioner
input.
Cosgrove. I move that we deny agenda item number 10.
We have a motion for the discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hotchkiss votes aye on the phone.
The motion to deny passes unanimously with the chair voting with those in attendance. Great, thank you. All right, let's move on then to the next item, which is agenda item 11, 24-0444
Excuse me.
HPC1.
That would be item 12. We already discussed
Oh, I
that.
thought I was going to do it again. Well, we already did that way up at the beginning. I'm going to move to item 12, which is 24-445 HPC1, report by the City of Las Vegas Community Development Department regarding a draft of a Section 106 Cultural Resources Inventory Report for the Marble Manor Housing Complex. The report was prepared for the Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority in the City of Las Vegas by Broadband and Associates. The need for the federal Section 106 review of this project is due to the fact that federal funds are expected to be used in the process to completely demolish the historic Marble Manor housing complex and replace it with new low-income and market-rate housing units. This agenda item is not an action item on the part of the HPC. It's simply a report with the opportunity to provide comments and feedbacks. Marble Manor, while not on the City of Las Vegas Historic Register, the State of Nevada Register, or the National Register of Historic Places, as pointed out in this report, is a significant part of the history of the City of Las Vegas and its residents. Under Federal 36 CFR Part 8800, Protection of Historic Properties, Subpart B, the Section 106 process, the City of Las Vegas Historic Preservation Commission is, quote, a participant in the Section 106 process under consulting parties through the certified local government agreement between the City of Las Vegas and the Historic Preservation Office. According to 36 CFR Part 800, The federal goal of the 106 consultations is to identify historic properties that are potentially affected by the proposal, and then to assess its effects and seek ways to avoid, minimize, or, quite frankly, in this case, mitigate any adverse effects on the historic properties. The Historic Preservation Commission was invited to review this report, which was sent to the commission more than 2 weeks ago by city staff, and to provide comments to the city staff by tomorrow, August the 29th. Dr. Sebring?
Thank you, Seabrant, for the record. So again, Chairman Stoller, you covered that all very well. So the Southern Nevada Regional Housing, they received HUD funding for this project, which is federal funding, which is why it required the 106 review. And the consultant did find adverse effects on potentially eligible properties, could be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. They did have suggestions for some mitigation as far as the creation of some type of a book or a report detailing the history of the complex and the community that would be made available to the general public. They've also suggested the creation and installation of interpretive signage that, again, presents the history of Marble Manor, or to commission some type of a public art piece that represents the history of the Marble Manor. And I have received some comments already from some of you, so thank you. The comments will go back to the consultant in order to review, and then we'll let you know what has been edited. But again, because it's not on the register, we can't approve or deny the 106 review. We can just provide our comments.
Questions, comments, thoughts?
This is Commissioner Laramie. Yeah, I wanted to add that I think something that's missing from the 106 report, I think there's a lot that can be elaborated on in the social history area, especially in the context of civil rights. It's my understanding that Ruby Duncan lived at Marble Manor in the early days of her activism here in Las Vegas. I think that there's, a need to look into her timeline of living at Marble Manor and how that overlaps with her work on welfare rights and other civil rights issues. I believe she also worked with several of the women, single mothers specifically, living in Marble Manor on those issues. And so I think there's quite a bit of resident history that's potentially, or that is missing from the 106 report, and just some resources. I know there's an oral history with Ruby Duncan. There's also the book Storming Caesar's Palace that documents a lot of that history. Clay T. White perhaps would know some other names to kind of specifically look into within the oral histories that might be on record. And so I think, adding that, as I think there was 5 historic contexts mentioned in the report, and I think that civil rights history is another context that's missing and needs to be included. And building on that, there could possibly be individual buildings that are likely eligible based on the residents living in them during those time. Could necessitate re-examining criterion B for significance related to persons of historic significance. And then I just wanted to add that I think, based on those findings, that there should be some additional resolution solutions added that perhaps, I know one of the potential recommendations was preserving an individual building. So potentially, maybe the recommendation is to preserve specific individual buildings that are linked to residents of significance. Maybe there are markers which talk about the residents, but expanding some of those recommendations to include whatever findings may come out of some of that additional research.
while there are a few factual errors in this, I'd agree 100% with Commissioner Laramie on the civil rights aspect of this. Oftentimes these reports, as well as nominations to city, state, and federal registers, focus almost entirely on the architect. And I think that has been changing in the last few years. It didn't substantially change in this one. I stopped counting the number of times Mr. Zick's name was mentioned, and he rightfully should be mentioned because he and his team built several important buildings. What wasn't really clarified is he built these buildings while he was a city commissioner and was on the planning commission. I'm not sure we need a full George Knapp investigative report into this, but that seemed to be something that could have at least be mentioned. But the better part of is the opportunity for the mitigation. And while I thought the report was in great detail and was just very interesting to read, the mitigation efforts seem to be an old-style mitigation efforts. You take photographs, high-res, you get the documents, and you put them in an archive. We're long past that sort of mitigation efforts into making these things public, accessible to the public through websites, through documentaries, and while I would encourage saving one of the buildings, and I put that in the report, and plaques are nice, and public art is nice, but the civil rights and the human beings that lived in this, that all needs to be recognized at that moment. This was the first city housing project by the city of Las Vegas, the first city housing authority. I'm a tangent for a second. When you Google that, search that engine on the City of Las Vegas website, it says it was built in 1942. And 100 homes were built there, or units were built there for veterans only, and it wasn't until 1952. I didn't see that in this report. So there are some little details like that need to be cleaned up. But I was very pleased to be able to read this report. And I hope that the process is that our reports and our comments will be forwarded to Broadbent or to the Housing Authority or to the Community Affairs Division. I mean, who gets them?
I would send them directly to Broadbent with the CC to the Housing Authority, who they're working with.
Great, thank you. Please.
Commissioner Laramie, sorry, I just thought of one other person, and I apologize if I get this name wrong. I think it was Lubertha Johnson, was not a resident of the historic West Side, but was significantly involved in getting more housing, including this public housing project to the historic West Side. So I think she's another figure that, again, her oral history is available, that absolutely needs to be mentioned in this report as well.
I'm sorry, what did you say her first name was?
Lubertha, and I can confirm that and email you today.
Further comments? Otherwise,
Yes.
oh, please.
Commissioner Perdue, I would also like to advocate for keeping at least one of the buildings, if not two. They were built out of cinder block, and I'm certain that the walls will still be standing. Maybe it will need to be improvised in some way, but it certainly could be used in the new public housing project in one way or another. And it would be nice to have the actual building on the actual site. It is a huge site, and it was significant at the time, very significant.
Thank you. All right. Further comments? We then move on to agenda item 13. 13th item on the Historic Preservation Commission agenda, which doesn't have an HPC number, is a report by the Community Development Department regarding any updates by the department related to historic preservation. The department director is Seth Floyd.
For the record, Michael Howe, Seth is out enjoying his birthday. I have no updates to give you other than happy birthday, Seth.
Well, happy birthday. And without any sarcasm, this is the second meeting in a row that there's been no report. Item 14 on the Historic Preservation Commission agenda, also without an HPC number, is a report by the Community Development Department regarding project update list. Dr. Seabrand, I believe this is your report?
It is, thank you, Seabrant, for the record. So the Cliff May Home Survey and the Historic West Side School National Register update are both with SHPO. They've been with SHPO for more than 2 months, and they are behind on their reviews, so I still don't have anything back from the state on either of these for concurrence on the Cliff May homes or the any type of feedback on the school update.
Dr. Seabrand, they're commenting on the reports and the revisions that this commission suggested, right?
Correct, yes.
Gotcha.
And so I'm just waiting for them to get those back to me, and as soon as they are back, we'll get them back on the HPC agenda. The Mormon Fort update, you did just hear that report this morning. Design guidelines for the John S. Park and Beverly Green historic areas, that is tonight at 6 p.m. John S. Park Elementary School, and I think, where are we, Teresa? In the cafeteria. And you aren't required to attend, but if you wish to attend, you are more than welcome. The Huntridge neighborhood signs, those have been completed and given to Public Works, and they just need to be installed. They need to get them ready for installation, and that can be up to 3 weeks, but we'll let everybody know once it is, once they are hung. We will do some type of a media, at least on our social media, as far as promoting not a historic district, but historic aged neighborhoods. The Old Frontier Bank that Legal Aid has purchased, there was an item on Planning Commission on August 13th. Anybody is welcome to go back and look at that meeting and listen to that meeting. It's item number 44. They did not talk about the design much. It was really about the closing of 8th Street and what that would mean to the community. However, Legal Aid did provide this rendering, and again, I encourage you to look on the website on that meeting. There are dozens of images of before, after. This image is what they are proposing. They're going to keep the Brise Soleil on the right-hand side of your screen, as well as some of the original bricks that are on the south side of the building, and then they'll emulate the Brise Soleil on the other end of the building. And then our future agenda items, still pending on all of these. Either haven't heard back from people, or we're still doing some research. For the Las Vegas High School, we will have that report at our September meeting. So happy to answer questions if there are any.
Comments, thoughts?
Yeah, Commissioner Stottle, through
Please.
you, Commissioner Moody. This says Floyd Lamb Park signs. Aren't we also waiting for a general report on Floyd Lamb?
Yes, but that's not going to be for months. It won't be till next year.
Oh, all right. Good to know. Thanks.
Commissioner Laramie, just a couple questions on the bank building. I know we had requested that the Legal Aid Center have a presentation. I know that's not required to HPC. Just curious if that invitation was extended and if there's been any response to
Yes, it was
that.
extended by phone and by email, and I have not heard back.
Okay. And then also, just on the conservation districts, I know it says researching, and curious where we are on that. This item has been on the list for several months, if not a couple years now, so hoping we can bump up the priority on that and have a conversation soon.
Anybody else?
Forgot, what's the Old Spanish Trail?
Oh, that's the exhibit at the State Library, I'm sorry, Hollis, the State Museum.
Okay. And what are we researching?
Sorry, that's incorrect. That should have been the date that the exhibit is November, October? Hollis, can you please remind me?
Okay, so
Hollis Gillespie.
it's not an agenda item for us, per se, it's just an announcement? Wonder why it's on our agenda item. You gonna make a presentation?
Oh, actually, you know what that is? Sorry, it took me a minute for my brain to catch up. There's been talk about doing some type of either a report or something for the Old Spanish Trail that comes through the city of Las Vegas. And as far as do we want to do a historic context? Is it something that we want to do? I mean, it is on the National Register. And so if we want to embellish the Las Vegas part of that, this was a discussion, I think, quite a while ago. And I'll have to go back and look at my notes for that one.
Yeah, it's a relatively challenging topic in that there's a great deal of misinformation about the first visit of the trail creation back in 1829 regarding where the travelers where they traveled throughout southern Nevada, throughout Clark County. Although then it would have been in what, New Mexico? No, then it would have been in Mexico. Yeah. Part of the territory of Mexico or Spain. But in any case, there's just a lot of, first, there is a very limited one report from that time period about what took place. And there is no exact path through the city of Las Vegas. Later versions, people travel through, and it was called the Spanish Trail, and then the Mormon Trail, Mormon Route. But if we go back to the original one in 1829, as the Clark County website says, it didn't get to the Las Vegas Springs, as is claimed. It hugged really the eastern edge of the valley. So I don't know what we're doing with this. I don't know what our...
I think that there was the conversation that we haven't done anything with it.
Okay.
And should we?
Okay. Well, potentially, we can wait and see how the exhibit goes, and you're going to have some public discussions at that, and so, and there is a marker at the Las Vegas Springs Preserve.
Also at the Mormon Fort, yes, there's a marker there as well.
Yeah.
But they do admit that they don't know if it actually came through there.
Right. Further comments, questions? Yeah, please.
Commissioner Perdue, I did have a question. I know we've talked about this before. The historic markers that are in neighborhoods that they have the City of Las Vegas logo on them. Tell me who designates those and who authorizes those.
That's actually a question for Director Floyd. So we'll get back to you at the next meeting.
What, the historic markers in front of neighborhoods that have the City of Las Vegas logo on them, who authorizes them and who pays for them? Who puts them up?
I think that's a question
That
for
would be
Director Floyd.
like the Wesley District, the Bel Air District, the McNeil area. You see signs all the time that say historical area.
Well, something occurred that the city streets department was unilaterally putting those signs up. And then a while back, a couple of years ago, Director Floyd stepped in and made a point that anything that used the word historic neighborhood should come before us. I don't know where that matter stands now.
Well, those markers that you're mentioning are old, and since we've had that conversation, it may have been before you were here, I don't remember. But just, I understand that there's some that have the city seal and the name on them. Several of those, though, like, don't. That's like those neighborhoods put them up. If they don't contact us, we don't have a control of what they're calling their neighborhood. But Director Floyd would have the information on his level of why those and how those signs were installed.
I know most of them do have the City of Las Vegas logo on them, and it's confusing to people because they will say that's a historic district, when it isn't an official historic district.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you right now.
Yeah, it would just be nice if we had, I think it was maybe 6 neighborhoods, if we kind of understood when those signs went up. That would be a nice piece of information that City
Just to know.
Streets, I'm sure, would be very happy to give us.
I'm not challenging them. I just would like to have an idea of when they went up and why they went up.
All right,
So-
great, thank you. An important question, and I think from now on, if the city seal goes on them, it'll come before this commission. Move on then to agenda item 15, this is 240446 HPC1, report by the Community Development Department regarding historic and archaeological resources in the local media. Again, if you see something that you feel would be valuable for the other commissioners to read, please send the information to Dr. Sebrian. Potentially a link would be better. Agenda item 16, discussion regarding future agenda items. Comments made during this portion of the agenda by individual members shall refer solely to proposals for future agenda items, and any discussion shall be limited as to whether or not such proposed items are within the purview of the commission and/or whether the proposed items shall be placed on future agendas. No discussion regarding the substance of any such proposed topic shall occur, and no action shall be taken. Does any commission member have anything they would like to put forth on a future agenda? With a reminder that we've already passed the city's deadline to put any items on the September agenda, unless, of course, an emergency. Future agenda items this side of the room? This side of the room? Dr. Laramie?
Commissioner Laramie, for the record, I am not a doctor. Just following up on some of my earlier comments, I'd like to request that we have, I guess, a discussion or put forward a project to develop an Indigenous peoples historic context for the city of Las Vegas, as well as a civil rights historic context for the city of Las Vegas. I think both of these things would be important resources for future survey work, as a lot of this is very specific and time-consuming research that I think often can't be done on a project-based, survey-based project. So I think it would be very helpful and could improve our surveys moving forward to have these contexts in place as resources for our consultants. And then I know we've done kind of a presentation by economic development in the past. I'm not sure the best way to kind of communicate some of our ideas to them, but a discussion on maybe how we could potentially work with redevelopment on improving, some of the historic preservation incentives or approach to adaptive reuse and historic rehabilitation through their redevelopment work.
Thank you. Other comments? All right, then let's move on to agenda item 17, citizen participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on a single subject, as well as the amount of time on any particular topic that a single speaker would like to address may be limited. Dr. Seabrand, anybody? Oh, please, welcome. No, looks like you're it.
Okay,
Head
thank
of
you,
line,
Commissioner
number one.
Sprotle. Commissioners, Lex Anderson, I'm the historian for our neighborhood association. Actually, I'm just a clerk. I just do documentation and file records on our community. If you know where the Roadkill Grill is, that's our hood. We just got a request, please, that perhaps some of you can you work your magic on. We've come to the realization that our area was annexed from North Las Vegas into the city some 60 years ago. A very astute staff member at the Planning Commission found the documentation for us. What we're trying to do is annotate that documentation onto a map. We've contacted a number of resources, and I haven't had any luck so far. And I have a handout here that I can give each of you if you kind of look at it, and maybe one of you might get some inspiration and come up with a resource for us. We're 29 years old. We're 30 years old next year. We missed out on our 25-year anniversary because of COVID, so we expect to have a big shindig next year at our March 30th next year. And it would be nice to have this content as part of it.
Real quick for the record, the name of the association is?
Northwest Area Residents Association.
And what's its primary function?
It's a neighborhood association to maintain the sustainability of rural preservation within the context of Title 19.
And roughly, how big of an area does it cover?
It's 1.026 square miles. We have 648 homes. Within the context, we also have 7 HOAs that are kind of like associated with us. We meet 10 times a year. We are meeting at the Parson Elementary School for pretty much the whole time. So we've been around for quite a long time.
Are there any historic structures that this commission, that the public would recognize?
Well, we certainly have the Roadkill Grill.
Okay.
And
that's on the city register, I believe, yes?
It sits on the city register, and also recently it just got state recognition.
Great. Okay, so that's, we know, okay, so that's a general, is that kind of in the middle of this area?
It's up in the northwest. It's up on North Las Vegas Airport. It's, like I say, if you know where the Roadkill Grill is, it's not too far from the Santa Fe.
Okay.
Okay.
And what you're asking us for is help in...
I just got a handout, and if anybody might come up with a resource that might be able to transfer the annexation documentation from the narrative, from the parcel language onto a map so people can have a visual of it. When you look at this stuff on paper, it makes no sense. When you see a picture, that makes sense. So that's what we're trying to do.
So you have, I think the bottom line of your request is you have a series of parcel numbers and you want them transferred into a visual document, a map.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if anybody has any... Mr. Moody?
Yeah, Commissioner Moody, through the chair. Lex, is this as simple as finding a pre-annexation map and then comparing it with a map afterwards to be able to show what portion of Nara or that area was carved out and moved?
Yeah, you know, looking at this documentation, it looks like the entire Nara Triangle is incorporated into this thing. If we get someone that knows the language and can take the parcel language off of it and stick it onto a map, then we can see exactly. But they talk about all the way to Rancho Road. They talk about all the way to Gowan. They refer to all the streets are pretty much incorporate within our area, but if we don't have it on black and white so people can see, you know, we really can't say. We can show we got this documentation, but it means nothing. So we're just trying to get it on paper so we can have a picture of our history.
Let me just Commissioner Moody again, let me just hone in on this. do you need someone to interpret that data if in fact there's a map that exists that shows what you're looking for?
That would be nice if there is a map that exists. I don't know how to get into that kind of stuff. Whoever knows how to do this, do a GSI language and so forth, I suspect they know how to do it. But it's a 60-year-old history, and it's a little bit out of our frame of reference. So,
I would think that this is a doable. I mean, if you have parcel numbers put on a map, and it should be doable. So I hope with this announcement that you're making here, you'll be able to get some help on this important project. I appreciate you coming and all the work that you've done in that area. And if you go as far south as Gowan, I may join your group. So my house may fall into your rural area. Okay. Any further questions or comments?
just one more, if I may, in reference to your Mormon Ford agenda. There's a book called Deseret Saint. It's one of my very favorite books on LDS history, written by a guy named Nels Anderson. I believe he was a professor down at Cedar City, and it's a real fun book. He specifically covers St. George, Las Vegas, and San Bernardino. He covers I Googled Benchmark Books. They still have one used copy for $11. It usually costs me $6 to get it. But it's called Deseret Saints by Nels Anderson. I've got a copy, but I covet my books, so nobody gets my books.
All right. Well, Bob, appreciate for that information. We'll pass that along.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And I'll leave these here for the secretary to pass out, please.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're on the last agenda item, which is adjournment. We're adjourned. Oh. Now we're adjourned.